I bought a house in Toronto for 425, which you could buy houses back then for. And yes, this helped the goal of paying off my mortgage as quickly as possible. Just because growing up, money was always a stress point in our household because I was raised by a single mother and my father wasn't around most of the time. So basically, by living frugally, I was able to save a ton of money. I was able to pay off the mortgage in only 3 years and 2 months. I didn't want to have to stress myself, and I just wanted to be able to enjoy myself more going forward. And since burning my mortgage, I've been able to travel to 20 different countries, which is amazing.
We're on For Rent Conversations to Better the Rental Industry. And my guest today is Sean Cooper. And Sean, you've done something very unique that I have not seen too many people doing. In fact, you even wrote a book on it. You've bought a house, and not only bought a house, but paid off your mortgage in record time with the title Burn Your Mortgage. And so much that you've been even shown on CBC talking about. So I think that's very cool, Sean. I just would love to get into your head and how you even arrived at this decision, and really just walk me through this journey of the trials and tribulations of going from start to finish. And I'm sure there's lots of details, there's lots of questions as you fill them
No,
in.
thanks so much for having me a guest on the podcast here. It's an honor to be on the show. And yes, a funny story is that originally this would have not happened with CBC if I hadn't have just casually mentioned it to a CBC reporter. She was actually interviewing me for a totally unrelated story on like super savers, which I guess is related to burning your mortgage. But I just happened to mention
Yeah.
my goal of paying off my mortgage as quickly as possible. And before I knew it, she was interested in that. A great reporter called Sophia Harris from CBC. And then she said, well, maybe we might turn one of these stories into a segment on CBC's The National. I can't make any promise, but we'll be in touch if we're interested. And lo and behold, they got in touch with me in the next couple of days, and I was just going to have a small celebration with my family, but then I ended up going all out like the CBC video there because the news was coming. But
Oh, that is so cool, man. And that's good for you. But like, I mean, again, back to the power of your story of what you've done. So for the people that aren't familiar with you, like, just give me the kind of the Coles notes
sure.
from when you decided to do this, how long it took, and what was the big things you do to make it actually
Sure.
happen.
So for anyone that hasn't heard of my story here, so basically, yes, I wanted to buy a house when I was younger. I actually wanted to buy my house earlier on, like at 23, but it was just so competitive in the housing market that it actually took me until 27 to end up buying my house because yeah, it was just like 2.5 years of looking for a property, losing out on so many bidding wars was definitely frustrating. I mean, I was able to save more money in the meantime, but I want to own a house a lot sooner. But nevertheless, I mean, I'm not complaining. I got into the real estate market at a great time. So I ended up buying in August 2012, which was, can't believe, over 10 years ago. Time really goes by quickly. Now, I don't want to get too fixated on the numbers because the prices were obviously less back then, but I definitely think that the lessons from my story are still relevant today. So I bought a house in Toronto for 425, which you could buy houses back then for. And yes, this helped the goal of paying off my mortgage as quickly as possible. Just because growing up, money was always a stress point in our household because money was always tight from a cash flow perspective because I was raised by a single mother and my father wasn't around most of the time. So yes, I just wanted to be able to not have that stress because I was on my own then, just paying the mortgage. I didn't want to have to stress myself, and I just wanted to be able to enjoy myself more going forward, be able to like spend my money guilt free, take trips places. And I mean, yeah, since burning my mortgage, I've been able to travel to 20 different countries, which is amazing. But yeah, I just didn't want to have that like ball and chain around my leg there of having a mortgage for the next 25 or 30 years. So I aimed to pay it off as quickly as possible. And yes, I ended up having a mortgage of a little over a quarter of $1 million, which I know by today's standards is pretty small. I mean, I regularly see people with mortgages of 700, 800, 900, more than that there. So definitely different times back then, but I definitely think my story is still relevant. So how I paid off the mortgage
Mm-hmm.
early was through a few creative ways. I first of all house hacked, which we can get into a little later on, but essentially I ended up living in the basement and renting the upstairs because it was just me on my own living in the property, and there's 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms upstairs, so I didn't need all that space. So I was able to bring in double the rent by doing that. And also I did a bunch of side hustles like writing and working part-time jobs, and like at the supermarket is not the most glamorous job, but definitely helped put some extra money against the mortgage. And yeah, basically I had my full-time job, and then any extra money I would make lump sum payments against the mortgage. And the beauty of that is that when you make lump sum payments, 100% of the money goes towards principal, whereas when you just make regular mortgage payments,
Mm-hmm.
it goes towards a split of interest and principal. Especially with these high interest rates, most of your money is probably going towards interest these days. So yeah, that was really my trick there. And yeah, it certainly helped having a big down payment as well. I put $170,000 down on the property, which is definitely a lot bigger than the average down payment there.
Yeah, that is quite a
But
bit.
how I did that was I always had side hustles. I worked extra jobs, worked like 3, 4 jobs throughout the school year, and then was able to graduate debt free with money in the bank as well. And I lived at home after that. I still paid my mother room and board and paid rent, but I mean, I wasn't going out and spending like $3,000 a month on rent or anything crazy like that. So basically, by living
Okay.
frugally, I was able to save a ton of money and have even bigger, like have a larger down payment, and then by that helped me have a smaller mortgage, and then I just continued living like that when I became a homeowner, and that's how I was able to pay off the mortgage in only 3 years and 2 months. So I had my mortgage burning party in October
Wow.
of 2015. Wow, time really flies.
Okay. All right. So I gotta unpack a ton of points I want to highlight that you've done there, Sean, because I find this super interesting. So just kind of getting back to your personal upbringing, as you mentioned, money was tight. So it sounds like the motivation for you to really be stress free from money was huge. Like it was a defining pinnacle in your life where you really literally took a very sharp pencil to how you manage your monies, where basically if you could save, you'd do it. It wouldn't go anything above and beyond. And then very, I would say very diligently took actions to keep your debts low. And then like you mentioned, you did prepayments on your mortgage, which are 100% principal payment, meaning that you're going strictly to paying down the value of the house or the mortgage, and not paying as much interest as you would typically by just doing the standard payment plan.
Yes, that's a perfect summary of everything, because yes, like money was always a stress point growing up because we were just a single income household. And yes, my mother lost her job on a couple occasions, and I remember how stressful it was. So yes, being a single income
Mm-hmm.
household myself, I just didn't want to find myself in that situation there, because yes, like the reality of today is that there's restructuring of companies all the time. Like people don't have jobs for life anymore like the olden days.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just a regular thing these days. And even you can be a great employee, and just because a company decides to lay off employees, you can lose your job even though you're a great performer there. So I just
Yeah.
didn't want to find myself in a situation like that. I mean,
Beholden.
I worked for a big company, and there were like I went through at least a couple mergers, and there's always job duplications during mergers. Luckily, there weren't layoffs, but I just didn't
Yeah.
want to find myself in that situation there. So that's why I kind of saw it as like short term pain for long term gain. By working hard for a few years, I could set myself up for the rest of my life not to have to stress about money as much as
Well,
most people.
look, can we give context to that point,
Sure.
Sean? Like, because I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to give up my lifestyle because I love doing, ABC. It's whatever, going out to sporting games or camping or traveling. And you've just mentioned you've also been traveling over 20 different countries. So you've been enjoying, the fruits of your labor by, enjoying those experiences that we all strive for. So Can you give me context from like the head down, hardworking phase of your life to, I mean, I'm totally blown away of your ability to crush a mortgage in less than 4 years. Like that's unheard of, Sean. So I mean, congratulations on that. That's nuts. And me as an Albertan looking out over in Ontario, like I had, to be truthful, wasn't started watching the market until about mid 2015s when we made our first home purchase. Granted, I did buy a condo in 2009, but I have also lessons learned from that. It wasn't the best purchase, but you did in Ontario, where it's always generally been a hot market from an Alberta's perspective, looking in at you guys in Ontario. So, what was this crunch period to when you started getting the rewards and you started traveling?
Yeah, so really it was from where I really started working hard was from when I got my first job at 18 years old at the supermarket, pretty much all the way until I paid off my mortgage at age 30. So it was quite a while. Now looking
Wow.
back, I certainly like, if hindsight's 2020, as they say, I definitely think I could have taken a more balanced approach and had more fun. And because they always say that the younger years are the best years of your life there, I don't have any regrets because I've been able to make up for all that and more by traveling to 20 countries. It'd probably be
Yeah.
25 or 30 if it wasn't for COVID, but nevertheless, I was able to make up for this later on. But yeah, going back, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, like I say in the book, like I don't expect everyone to replicate what I did and do that because that's just not realistic. But if you can learn a thing or two from my story and apply it to your own life,
Mhm.
then that's the power of my story there. Because yeah, looking back, I could have paid off my mortgage in maybe 5 or 6 years and had a lot more fun along the way. But I mean, what's done is done and I'm enjoying my life now. But yes, I would definitely like as they say, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So I mean, definitely you need to have some balance in your life there.
Yeah.
But for me, like really, I was like relentless when it came to financial goals. Like I would treat my financial goals as a top priority. Like the whole concept of paying yourself first that I heard in so many personal finance books like The Wealthy Barber by David Chilton. Basically, I would treat my
Mhm.
savings as the first priority, not the last priority, like a lot of people that basically just save whatever money is left in their bank account. I basically had like savings like an expense and I figured out exactly how much money I wanted to save each month and I had that automatically go into my savings account and then basically
Ah.
whatever money was left over, I could spend however I wanted, but I had specific goals of paying off a mortgage and I did the math and figured out how much money I'd need to put towards it to make sure that it happened. But yeah, really that it's no like complicated, trick or anything like that. It's really paying myself first was really helped me with my success.
Yeah, but Sean, I think you've done something with your mindset that not a lot of people have, or I just want to highlight that I think that's just really profound in the sense that you mentioned you treated savings like an expense, and I've never heard it put that way, but it rings so true. And I even personally do struggle with this paying yourself first concept where you make it happen no matter what, and then but you actually you very simply put it was pay yourself first, make it an expense. As that's a necessary expense. It's not optional. And you stuck to your goals of whatever you were targets to save per month. And then the rest of the money remainder was then how you built your lifestyle
Exactly.
around.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of like I kind of see budgeting as like crash dieting where people are like, oh, they set these really strict diets for themselves and they're like, oh, I can't eat any junk food and all, and you're just setting yourself up for failure if you do something like that. Whereas I find that if you basically treat like savings as a priority and make that your number one
Mm,
priority rather than being like, oh, I can only spend $200 a month on entertainment. I can only spend $400 a month on food. I have to track every single penny. I'm not a big fan of that. I personally like for some people budgeting can make sense because their expenses can get out of control. But I just find for a lot of people, the whole paying yourself first is the best way to go about doing it and what worked for me because yeah, basically I knew how much money I wanted to save each month. that money was out of sight, out of mind. I didn't touch that money. I made it as hard as possible to access, put it into another bank account, and then I could really like spend the rest of my money as I saw fit there. So I mean, I think that again, everyone's
Okay.
financial situation, everyone's money mindset is different, but I find that really made it easier because, like I said, with a crash diet, like if you're watching every single penny that you spend, I don't think that's why I just find many people fail at budgeting because they're just way too strict, similar to dieting. So if you
Yeah. And then it just
exactly,
crash and burn.
so
It's just
that's
not even
for me.
achievable. I think this is super cool. So you've done you made it really difficult to access the money you're saving, so you couldn't be tempted. And this is going to lead me into a question I want to ask you, Sean. You automated the automatic savings plan. So every month, probably the day or day after your paycheck came in, you automatically had that money pushed and put into another account. And as we already talked about, treating your savings like an expense, like a required expense. So very cool. Those three things sound like a really good formula for success. My question is, how did you fight temptation? How was there? I'm sure there must have been many, many times where you have been like, you know what, maybe this month I'll pull $200 and buy, or $100 and buy a new video game, or do whatever, or go spend for a trip for friends at the cabin, or a travel trip. How'd you? Was there a mindset, or was there a bit of a process you used to keep that temptation at bay? Like, how did you manage your temptations? Because I mean, that's what a lot of us would be struggling with.
Sure. So yes, definitely everyone has their vices or things that they enjoy, whether it's video games, traveling, or going out to
Mm.
restaurants or whatnot. I mean, I'm human as well, so I enjoy certain things like going out to restaurants, traveling, and going to sporting events as well. Like I'm a big Blue Jays fan. I don't go to much Maple Leafs games because it's like a mortgage payment on itself there. So the first way that I controlled my spending was by making it difficult to spend online because yes, many people spend a lot of money on online shopping. So how I controlled my spending there was I didn't save my credit card information on my computer or any websites at all. I mean, not only is it a security risk, if you can just click a couple buttons, it just makes it so easy to spend. I also didn't sign up for any services like Amazon Prime didn't exist back then, but I just didn't sign up for any like monthly services. Like there's even like meal services where they send you spend like a monthly amount and they send you ingredients. I mean, yeah, I'm not saying that those services aren't helpful, but the problem is there's this term called subscription creep where oh, you say, oh, it's just $10 a month, but then when you sign up for 100, like 15 of those, you're spending 150 money, $150 a month. So it can really add up. So I was just very careful
Hmm.
with my spending and especially recurring expenses. And yeah, I just made it as hard as possible to spend. If I really wanted to buy something online, I would have to I had my wallet like locked away in another room, so I just made it as hard as possible to spend my money. I had to walk into the other room and unlock a drawer. So really, I'd only do that if I really wanted to buy something. So that's the first way that I did it. And the second way was just the whole mindset thing and just focusing on the future because like this works for retirement savings as well. But if you tell people they need to save $500,000 for retirement, that doesn't really resonate much with people. But if you get them to visualize how their retirement will look, whether it involves cruises or playing golf or exotic vacations
Mm.
or whatever you want to do with your retirement, whether you're happy just going to the library or whatnot, just the whole visualization because like something like retirement's just an abstract concept, like paying off your mortgage, it's just numbers. It doesn't really mean anything. Whereas if you really focus on what it would actually look like and how it would change your lifestyle, that's what I find is that much more powerful. So yeah, it was just visualizing like once I pay off my mortgage, even planning the trips that I was going to take and like literally I planned out the trips that I was going to take once I pay off the mortgage and watch travel videos and things like that and knew exactly the places that I wanted to go to. But I still
Okay.
stayed disciplined financially. But yeah, just getting those ideas in my mind and getting myself excited, that really helped me stay focused because because yes, like if you just tell somebody to save for retirement, but they don't know why and what the retirement's going to look like, that's when I find people lose motivation.
I like that. I like getting really, really clear through your end game and your why, your motivation in life, because then it will motivate you. So that's super cool. Well, let's take a spin. So you've achieved this. This is again going back to 2010. So you mentioned you had some other rental properties. I know we were talking the one time before. Do you focus on investing in more properties now, or where do you like to put your money now, considering the type of I'd say respect that you have with your money?
For sure, definitely. Well, I enjoyed myself for a while by traveling and all that there, but yeah, I for a while I enjoyed having a paid off house, but then I put the equity to use because yeah, essentially if you're just leaving the equity sitting in your property and your property's not keeping up with inflation, the equity is actually shrinking. So I pulled out some equity to invest in the markets, and yeah, definitely looking for real estate opportunities out there to invest in. It's just a bit more challenging these days with the higher rental property prices and the higher mortgage rates.
Yeah.
It's more challenging to get a positive cash flow, but I definitely think that there are opportunities in Canada. Like I would say two very popular places to invest right now are Alberta as well as the Maritimes. Like as a mortgage professional, I help a lot of my clients in those two provinces there because the price of Alberta is about half of that of BC and
Yeah.
Ontario, and the the rules when it comes to like landlord tenant, I just find that they're a lot more favorable in Alberta than Ontario and BC. I mean, definitely, I'm not saying that you shouldn't respect your tenants and all that. Definitely follow all the rules, but I just find that the rules are a
Yeah.
lot more favorable to the tenant in Ontario and BC, whereas my understanding in Alberta is you can essentially pretty much raise the rent to whatever you want, whereas like Ontario and BC, there's a lot more stricter rules there. So just having
Essentially, yeah, yeah. It's I use the words well
mhm.
balanced. It's a very well balanced approach, which I think does well for market parity and price in between
It's
existing and
too
new tenants and
skewed. I find
renewals.
the rules are too skewed in favor of the tenants in Ontario and BC. You can definitely invest in those provinces there, but yeah, you really need to know the Landlord Tenant Act inside and out there because yeah, the tenants have a lot of. It's not like the old days when my parents had a rental property and the tenant wasn't paying his rent, so they just took all his stuff and left it on the front lawn and told them to leave. You can't do that,
Yeah,
unfortunately. You
no,
will
we've
get arrested
improved.
if you do that.
Yeah, 100%, Sean. It is not the truth. Yeah, no, we don't want to be doing any of that. But there was actually, on that note, there was a really interesting CHMC article that came out today, and they were looking at, you know what? Let me show this to you. What I thought was just so interesting. It highlighted, I think, not the fallacies, but like the shortcomings of having these unbalanced legislations that you speak of in the BCs and in Ontario, where you guys are, is legislation is kind of like a Slurpee straw.
It's a funny analogy.
If it's well balanced, it's going to allow both of the stakeholders or players in the process, of course, homeowners and renters, facilitate and do more transactions and move through the market with ease. If that legislation's unbalanced, it's restrictive. It becomes a net negative overall, and everyone loses. So yes, you got more protections for tenants in your province, but then there's a lot more fearful participation from the other side on the supply side from homeowners. And if they seem it too risky, they're not going to participate. Or if they can't get timely resolution to disputes and issues and unpaid rents and things of that nature, then the less likely they want to participate. So I'd equate I'd say Alberta is very good. It's like a Slurpee straw. Things flow well. You can kind of go back and forth. But I'd equate your legislation more to trying to drink a Slurpee through a coffee stir stick straw as opposed to the something that you want to be able to facilitate changes. So I could go on forever, but this is your show, so I'm gonna just park myself. But I'll share some numbers with you after the fact here. They just showed the rent difference between non-turnover units versus units that have just recently turned over, and of course Calgary and Edmonton. Since we're in Alberta, we don't have the rent controls that you mentioned. Though I would throw a caveat in there that you can actually go to RTDRS, which is our equivalent of the landlord tenant board in Ontario, and you can challenge unlawful or predatory rent raises. So there is like, you can adjust to market rates, which I think is the powerful part. That's the key takeaways. But
You can't just like quadruple the rent for no reason to get the that. Okay.
yeah, if it's predatory in nature and it goes from like 900 to up to 1800 or even like 1600, like nearly double, you're going to probably get thrown out because that's not reasonable.
That's good.
And it has to be within where the market's trending at too. You can't just, you know,
Arbitrarily raise it
3000
to get
bucks
the
here.
tenant to leave.
Yeah, exactly. It has to be within reason. So anyways, the parity between our non-turnover rent units and units that have just been released or re-rented out is very similar. And I think that's just so crucial because you get a bit of favoritism going on when you've got existing tenants that don't want to move because, you know, they've been locked in for 10 years or whatever it might be in Ontario, and now they're not even paying half of what the current market rate is. And I think this also creates a very a dangerous precedence because now you've got folks, and I've heard stories of, you've got seniors living in a 4-story walk up, they're on the top level and they can't physically get to the top of the unit. They need to move somewhere else, but now they're prison trapped by their rental unit because of the pricing that they're stuck with or that they
Yeah, I don't
currently
think
have.
the situation is good for landlord or tenants because like the landlord can't raise it to market levels and then they might be forced to sell the property so then the tenant can lose their place that way. Also the tenant gets used to like paying such a low amount for rent and then if they need to go out into the market and actually pay market rate, it can be very tough of an adjustment from a cash flow perspective. So yeah, like people might think it's beneficial to tenants, but I just think it doesn't work for either party. So yeah, I would definitely like to see more of a Alberta model in like Ontario and BC.
Yeah, for
I guess
sure.
I'm preaching to the choir
Cool.
probably.
It probably a little bit. I'm here, but again, like tenants, I think about what their needs are, and I've rented as well before, and it's just like, oh, and right now it's the market's it's inelastic, meaning that the supply can't, you know, keep up to the rapid change, relatively speaking, of what demand's going through. So it's tough right now. And now, and we're kind of finally gotten to place, at least in Calgary here, and I'm seeing Edmonton catch up a little bit behind us, where you guys have been, man, you guys have been in a crazy market for like what, 7, 8 years at least, where it's just been demand driven almost like nonstop.
But yeah, certainly, like I can't remember the last time the market has really slowed down here in Ontario. But yeah, just definitely, I understand how it can be discouraging for people wanting to buy a house in like Ontario and BC with how competitive it is. But yeah, you just have to be more creative. Like I find that it really helps to build like a personal connection with the home sellers. Like that's really helped me secure my property because yeah, if you're just like
Mhm.
a name on a piece of paper making an offer, you don't really stand out. Whereas if you take the time to actually get to know the home sellers, introduce yourself and mention you'll take good care of their property, maybe tell them that like you're a young family looking to raise your kids there. I definitely find like not everyone is like this, but I definitely find a lot of the times people are willing to work with somebody in a situation like that. They might not like want a developer just to buy their house and tear it down because they have so many great memories there. So yeah, I definitely think I'm not saying it's not
Mm.
challenging in this market. It definitely is, but building that personal connection with the home seller, I find is really key. Like, if you can meet them, then great. If you can write them like a handwritten letter and include a photo, something like that. Like really anything you can to stand out, I think is helpful because with some,
I think that's so true, Sean. I mean, that's like, actually, I want to highlight that because that's such a pro tip of kind of get yourself noticed in a market, in a multi bidding market where you've got multiple bids coming on available listings. And you know, I just have 2 vacancies right now that I'm filling, and the tenants that did exactly what you just mentioned took an extra step to make a personal connection, reach out to me, really did stand out and got to my shortlist because there's factors I'm considering that aren't really listed in my rental ad that go beyond that, kind of come back to making that relationship, that those intentionally, unintentionally, that they're able to appeal to me as those prospective fans looking for their next unit.
No, totally. Yes. So whether you're looking to rent a place or buy a place, definitely building that personal connection, I find can really help set you apart from the pack there. So yes, definitely take that extra time to do that. And yes, like, I mean, how I ended up getting my property was I ended up, like doing what's called a preemptive offer or bully offer. But, I mean, I'm not going to spoil everything from my book, but I talk about some of those, things in my book there. But yeah, just trying to sell yourself to the home buyer and that you're like going to take good care of the property because yeah, it's not just like imagine if you're applying for a job and they just pick the person based on like the highest GPA. Like that's not the way that it works. Like we're human beings and we consider
Yeah.
like the X factors and we want like somebody who will take good care of the property and all that. So definitely try to kind of pull at the heartstrings of people. I find that can really help you in situations where you're having a tough time, like buying a property or like renting a property. I find that really has helped.
Yeah. And of course, being in a genuine fashion. We're not just saying like, you know, pick on, but yeah, like just try to make that connection. It does go a long way. Well, let's kind of bring this show to a close. I know in a week's time or so, I get to be a guest in your show. But Sean, for the people that listen to Far Rent Conversations to better the rental industry, you're definitely one of them. I think your story of knocking out a mortgage in under 4 years is
Thank
incredibly
you.
impressive. It's very cool. And I didn't even know you're a mortgage broker, which is so fitting given your talent and your skill set. So I think that that's super cool. How can people find you if they want to get a hold of you, ask you some questions, or perhaps they're looking for a
No, thanks
mortgage?
so much for letting me be a guest on your podcast. I'm looking forward to you being a guest on mine in a week's time here. So yes, if you'd like to get in touch with me, I have a website. It's called www.burnyourmortgage.ca, similar to the exact same title as my book there. So burnyourmortgage.ca. And yes, you can check out my website and reach out to me through that. That's the easiest way to do that. And if you want to send me an email, you can do that or book a calendar invite with me and book a call with me. I'd be more than happy to help you. And yeah, I would say I help many first time home buyers, many real estate investors, or whether your mortgage is coming up for renewal, I'm more than happy to help you there. So yes, if you want to visit the website or you can just email Sean at burnyourmortgage.ca. That's Sean, Sean, as in Sean Connery, not the American spelling there. So you can also send me an
Yeah.
email and you can get in touch with me that way. But yes, it's been
Well,
a pleasure being on the podcast and looking forward to returning the favor in a week's time.
awesome. Well, thank you, Sean. A ton of good tidbits, information. I'm pretty excited to go through the show notes for this one. So, thank you so much for being our guest today, and thank you
My
for your
pleasure.
time.